There are few differences between the lies told to ignite the war with Iraq and the lies told to ignite a war with Iran. The assessments of our intelligence agencies and international bodies are as they were during the calls to invade Iraq. All the old tropes have been resurrected to entice us into another military fiasco. A country that poses no threat to us or to its neighbors is on the verge of acquiring a weapon of mass destruction that imperils our existence. The country and its leaders embody pure evil. Freedom and democracy are at stake. If we do not act now, the next smoking gun will be a mushroom cloud. Our military superiority assures victory. We are the saviors of the world. Massive bombing, an updated version of shock and awe, will bring peace and harmony. We heard these canons leading up to the 2003 war in Iraq. 22 years later, they have been resurrected. Anyone who advocates for negotiations, for diplomacy and peace, is a stooge for terrorists. Did we learn any lessons from the fiascos in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, and Syria? Not to mention Ukraine. All the ghouls who sold us these past wars on false pretenses, such as conservative talk show host Mark Liven Max Boot, who writes that strategic imperative argues for bombing Fordo, where Iran's nuclear enrichment program is buried underground. David Frum, John Bolton, Jack Keane, Newt Gingrich, Sean Hannity, and Thomas Friedman have returned to saturate the airwaves with breathless fear-mongering. Never mind that their grand plan to topple the Taliban in Afghanistan and then invade and replace the regimes in Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, Libya, Sudan, Somalia, and finally in Iran, blew up in their faces. Never mind that their lust for war left hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions dead, and drained trillions from the US Treasury.
Never mind the sheer idiocy of their arguments. Their megaphones are secure, they are dutiful shills for the war industry, brain-dead neoconservatives and genocidal Zionists who believe in the magical regeneration of the world through violence, ignoring catastrophe after catastrophe. Forget the intelligence community's annual threat assessment that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon and Supreme Leader Khomeini has not authorized the nuclear weapons program that he suspended in 2003. Something reiterated by the International Atomic Energy Agency Director General Rafael Grossi this week. Forget that Benjamin Netanyahu, for almost 3 decades, has been breathlessly warning that Iran is on the cusp of producing a nuclear weapon. Forget that the preemptive attack on Iran by Israel is a war crime. Not to mention the bombings of a hospital ambulance and journalists. Forget the hundreds of Iranian civilians Israel has slaughtered in its waves of airstrikes. Forget that Israel launched its attack on Iran as the 6th round of negotiations on nuclear enrichment between the US and Iran were set to take place in Oman. Forget that it is the Israeli Prime Minister, not the leader of Iran, who is subject to an arrest warrant, accused of war crimes and crimes against humanity. Forget that Israel, in the midst of carrying out a campaign of genocide against the Palestinians, possesses at least 90 nuclear weapons, built in violation of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and blocks inspections by the IAEA. Forget that Donald Trump ripped up the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action in 2018, an agreement to limit Iran's nuclear program, which Iran was abiding by. Forget that Washington and London orchestrated the 1953 coup to topple Iran's democratically elected government, the first in the region, and installed the compliant Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi into power. Forget that the US, along with Israel, trained and equipped the SAVAK, the Shah's savage secret police. Iran's purported nuclear weapons program is the evidence-free equivalent of Saddam Hussein's mythical WMDs and alliance with Al-Qaeda. the invasion and occupation of Iraq, which led to the deaths of over 4,000 US soldiers and Marines and hundreds of thousands of Iraqi civilians, resulted in widespread destruction, regional instability, and gave birth to a range of fanatical extremist groups, including the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. The assurances that our invasion would implant democracy in Baghdad, which would emanate outwards across the Middle East, that we would be greeted as liberators and that the oil revenues would pay for the reconstruction, were a fantasy dreamed up by the George W. Bush administration and Washington think tanks. These shills for endless war do not grasp the mechanism or the consequences of war. They are culturally, historically, and linguistically illiterate about the countries they attack: Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, Iran. I doubt they can tell the difference. These cheerleaders of war, once they are proven wrong, are adept at issuing mea culpas. They assure us of their good intentions. They did not mean to peddle disinformation. They only wanted to keep the world safe from evildoers and protect our national security. No one, even those within the Bush and now Trump administrations, are intentionally dishonest. It is not their fault if they act on flawed intelligence. The problem is one of judgment, not virtue. They are good people. But this, perhaps, is the biggest lie. The intelligence assessments used to justify the war against Iraq were cooked up by a cabal of lunatic neoconservatives and rabid Zionists because they did not like the assessments of the Central Intelligence Agency and other intelligence agencies. Now another cabal, dominated by Israel firsters, is concocting bogus intelligence assessments to justify a war with Iran. These wars are not prosecuted in good faith. They are not based on a careful and rational assessment of verifiable intelligence. They are utopian visions severed from reality, where our own intelligence agencies are ignored along with international bodies such as the United Nations, WMD inspectors, or the IAEA. The history of modern Iran is the history of a people battling tyrants propped up and funded by Western powers. The brutal crushing of legitimate democratic movements over the decades resulted in the 1979 revolution that brought the Iranian clerics to power. The new Islamic government of Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini championed Islam and argued for standing up to arrogant world powers and their regional allies who would oppress others, including Palestinians, to serve their own interest. The central story of Iran over the last 200 years has been national humiliation at the hands of foreign powers who have subjugated and looted the country.
Stephen Kinzer, the author of All the Shah's Men, An American Coup and the Roots of Middle East Terror, told me, for a long time, that the perpetrators were the British and Russians. Beginning in 1953, the United States began taking over that role. In that year, the American and British Secret Services overthrew an elected government, wiped away Iranian democracy, and set the country on the path to dictatorship. Then, in the 1980s, the US sided with Saddam Hussein in the Iran-Iraq War, providing him with military equipment and intelligence that helped make it possible for his army to kill hundreds of thousands of Iranians. Kinzer said, given this history, the moral credibility of the US to pose as a promoter of democracy in Iran is close to nil. How would we react if Iran orchestrated a coup in the US to replace an elected government with a brutal dictator who for decades persecuted, assassinated, and imprisoned democracy activists? How would we react if Iran armed and funded a neighboring state, as we did during the 8-year war with Iraq, to wage war against us? How would we react if Iran shot down one of our passenger jets, as did the USS Vinson, caustically nicknamed the Robocruiser by the crews of other American vessels, when in July 1988 it fired missiles at a commercial aircraft filled with Iranian civilians, killing all 290 passengers, including 66 children? How would we react if Iranian intelligence services sponsored terrorism within the US, as our Israel's intelligence services do in Iran? How would we react if these state-sponsored terrorist attacks included suicide bombings, kidnappings, beheadings, sabotage and targeted assassinations of government officials, scientists, and other Iranian leaders? How would we react if, like Israel, a country attacked us based on a hypothesis, an attack that is illegal under the UN Charter, which forbids preemptive war? The pimps of war who orchestrate these military fiascos have risen once again from the crypt. They migrate like zombies from administration to administration. They are ensconced in think tanks. Project for the New American Century, American Enterprise Institute, Foreign Policy Research Initiative, the Atlantic Council and the Brookings Institution, funded by corporations, the Israel lobby, and the war industry. They are puppets jerked up and down by their masters, given megaphones by a bankrupt media, urging us forward from one quagmire to the next. The old faces and the old lies are back, exhorting us into another nightmare.